and I call the member for Longman.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, later today, perhaps even in a few moments' time, the Australian Senate will vote, and all going to plan, the Australian Senate will vote to repeal the world's largest carbon tax. This has been a significant attack on the welfare of the Australian people, on growth, on jobs, and of the cost of living of so many Australians. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I think it is a remarkable thing that when the Australian people voted in such an overwhelming way, that those members opposite, members of the Labor Party, have consistently voted since the election to support the carbon tax. We have seen the members on the other side of this room vote at least 3 times in this parliament to keep the carbon tax. And what that is a $550 a year hit on families in my local community. It is thousands of dollars in extra costs for local businesses who just want to get on with the job and employ more people. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is hopefully a historic day for our parliament, where the coalition will deliver on what was one of its largest election commitments, which was to repeal the Labor Greens carbon tax. And what this shows, Mr Deputy Speaker, is we actually have a plan for the future of our country, a plan to go for growth, because we do face significant challenges as a nation, Mr Deputy Speaker. And in order to rise to meet those challenges, we have to give the private sector, not the government, but the private sector across the Australian economy, every opportunity to get ahead and do what they do, which is to grow, to prosper and to employ more people. And you simply don't do that by imposing bigger, new taxes on the Australian people and on Australian business. And Winston Churchill had a great quote, Mr Deputy Speaker, where he said, "The idea that we can tax a nation into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket trying to lift himself up by the handle." But unfortunately, that's the only policy that the Labor Party has in the modern era, because they don't have a policy to deal with the debt legacy that they left us, Mr Deputy Speaker. And the Labor Party left us, if we do nothing, $667 billion worth of debt, and that's $24,500 for every single man, woman and child. And to say that an Australian born today has to inherit that from the mess that was left to us by the former Labor government is simply inequitable and unfair to the next generation of Australians. Of course, when the coalition left government last time around, Mr Deputy Speaker, we had a $20 billion surplus and $50 billion in the bank. So the Labor Party have left us a very significant debt burden, and not only do they not have any policies to deal with the mess that they left us, but they even oppose measures that they used to have in terms of savings that they took to the last election. So they truly are a party with no political spine, simply a populist movement, and that's not good enough when it comes to fixing our nation's problems. And beyond the debt burden, Mr Deputy Speaker, we also have the challenge, and I would say it's a challenge but not a problem, but the challenge of the ageing of the population. And the facts are this, Mr Deputy Speaker. Today we have about 5.7 people working for every person that's not working. And even with that arrangement, we're still not funding the needs of our nation. That's why we're heading to that $667 billion. So with 5.7 people in the workforce today for every person that's not, we're going to head to a point as a nation where that's about 2.5. So we're not funding the system today at 5.7 people working for everyone that's not in the workforce, and we're going to go to 2.5. And the Productivity Commission has looked at this, and they said if we don't do other things, we would have to increase taxes by 21%. That's an increase in tax before we even deal with the debt burden that our nation faces. And on this side of the House, Mr Deputy Speaker, we actually believe in lower taxes, not higher taxes. So that's why it is so important that in the Senate today, the Labor Party are going to vote against the repeal of the carbon tax. The Greens are going to vote against the repeal of the carbon tax. But perhaps in the coming weeks in the Senate, I really hope that they have a long, hard think about what they're going to do in terms of our budget repeal measures, because if they don't support some of our measures, it is the next generation that will inherit $18 billion a year in interest bill. That's money we can't spend on roads and schools and hospital. It is the next generation that will inherit a society where we do have to raise taxes because we have the challenge of the ageing of the population. It's the next generation that will inherit Australia where there's a $24,500 a year debt bill. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's actually time now for the opposition, for the crossbench, to put up some alternatives, because it will be the next generation that pays if they don't.
Time has expired.